I wanted to go through security roles in today's environment because I think that the breadth of security jobs that are out there has been growing and changing dramatically since I first got into computer security. I'm going to go through what we should really be talking about whenever somebody refers to APT. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to go through some of the impacts that these security breaches that you've been hearing about in the news lately, how it's affecting everybody, and why it's important that we have cybersecurity professionals in the world doing the job that they do. And then we're going to go through how this problem should be attacked. And we'll kind of deconstruct it through various different areas that, as a professional, you could work on. All right. Let's date myself now. Who can tell me what this is? Good. So Herman Hollerith. So it's a Hollerith punch card is the full name there. So my very first foray into doing anything with computers was actually doing COBOL programs on punch card stacks. So that kind of puts you in, how much fun that was to drop a deck at the college where you're writing these programs and then try to figure out how to sort it in. Now, how I got into actually transitioning from computers into computer security was a bit of an accident. I was doing systems analysis for Honeywell Federal Systems out in McLean, Virginia on the old Honeywell Bull mini computers, and I was studying part of the OS code and came to the part where it does the password hashing for any of the user accounts. And it was a fairly simplistic hash back in the days. We didn't have Diffie-Hellman and two-way hashing and worrying about large prime numbers and all that stuff. But I had figured out that I could basically write a program where if I typed any 4 letters in, it would tell me the next 4 letters I would have to type to match the same hash to the user's password. So I wrote this program and I was able to log in as anybody that was registered on the system. And I thought I had done a pretty cool thing. So I go and show it to my boss. Look at this cool thing I did. Isn't this great? And the next Monday I was transferred into the security group. But actually it turned out to be, I thought, one of the best things that ever happened to me because it's been a very fun, rewarding career. Started off in the old Rainbow series books, if anybody's done any government accreditation and certification of systems. This was the old methods of going through and proving out that a system actually does what it's supposed to do, and did some programming on multi-level secure systems for the government so that it could house different classification levels of security. So like secret, top secret, confidential. Here are some of the places that I've worked through my life. Got a lot of security operations center experience from my days in UUNet. Also worked a lot with law enforcement. So I did a lot of things where we were doing threats that were occurring over email or in chat rooms, bomb threats, online pedophiles and online predators. We did a lot of takedown of those people in coordination with the FBI and US Customs Service. At ISS, that's where I got my introduction into intrusion detection systems and vulnerability scanners. ArcSight introduced me to the world of security information event management and log management technologies. Mandiant, and which was acquired by FireEye, is where I got my endpoint forensics experience and really got into the world of advanced targeted attack groups that we are seeing make the news a lot lately. And last line is through automated malware analysis. So basically any file coming across the wire, it'll take it, analyze it, and see if it does anything malicious in nature and report on what those actions are going to be. So let's talk a little bit about security roles. So again, as you see, I'll date myself through all of these examples that I will give here. Who remembers what this movie is? War Games. So back in the day, there weren't a lot of security roles. It was kind of like the Old West with the medical profession. There was just one doctor you went to and he handled anything that was wrong with you. And back in the day, it was like there was one person that designed the system and they were responsible for designing all the security that went into the system, and that was the go-to person. So that's, Matthew Broderick went to these two guys, and I just love the scene where the guy's talking, Mr. Potato Head, back doors are not secrets. And they were the ones that built all that system for the Whopper, as I recall, that secured it. But now when you look at the world of security, there are as many security profession jobs out there as there are medical profession jobs that are out there. So it covers the gambit from data security, bring your own device, encryption, legal, regulatory. So pretty much any job that you could think of has some place in the cybersecurity world. So you can kind of start at what is generally considered the top in a corporation, the Chief Information Security Officer, and get right through incident responders, SOC analysts, risk managers that are actually working the day-to-day incidents, responding to the alerts that are out there. But you can also get into like legal specialists. And even if you're doing marketing, you could work for a security firm that's out there marketing what their product is. So it's become a huge industry, and we'll talk a little bit more about the impact of that as we go through. It's probably one of the best times to be getting into cybersecurity. If you look, all the news in the last year, year and a half has really driven a growth in this industry that's been unparalleled. So definitely the place to be, I believe, for 2015 and beyond. So if you would believe Hollywood, they want to make you believe this is what you're protecting yourself against. When unfortunately, really, it looks more like this. So these advanced targeted attack groups that are doing these major breaches that you hear about in the news primarily are working out of office buildings. They may be state-sponsored, and they are sitting there at their computers, and they may have different jobs in this organization just like we do in a regular office. A few years back, the industry started coining the term APT, and the next year I went to the RSA Security Show. Every single vendor in the room claimed that they had an APT solution. And I really wanted to talk to our marketing people and say, I'm going to hire my plumber and I'm going to bring him out. And he's going to have a booth that says, I solve all APT troubles. And then in real 6-point font, it was going to say advanced plumbing trouble. Because that was pretty much what it was. Marketing hears a term, and then they try to figure out how they can use that buzzword in whatever it is their product is doing today. So it got muddied down. But if we break it down, APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. So if we look at this, when we refer to advanced persistent threat in the true sense, we're talking about a well-trained, organized, equipped organization or group of individuals. This is nation-state sponsored, organized crime, terrorist groups, or organized hacktivists. One of the most prevalent groups out there is a group called Anonymous that gets a lot of press out there. By persistence, we mean they're mission-oriented. They did not randomly pick your organization or the people within your organization for their attack. They are after something that your organization has or that you possess, and they're not going to give up just because you found them. If you discover them and kick them out, they are going to keep coming at you, and they'll try different ways to do it. By threat, again, they want specific intellectual property that you possess. They're looking to gain economic advantage for their business or for their country. There's financial motivation, and that's been what all these retail breaches have been about. Or they're looking to do some type of disruption or destruction to your infrastructure or to some program that you're building out. And we have a few famous examples of those that'll come up. Now, what the APT is not, and this is where the waters got muddied as marketing picked up on this term and started blasting it away, it's not a remote access Trojan or some sophisticated piece of malware. Now, APT groups use those tools to get their job done. But just like a table saw is not a carpenter, software is not an advanced persistent threat. It's also not a comp-sci major with nothing better to do on a Saturday night, just, or trying to break in just for the fun of it. So they're people, and their actions are driven by human intelligence, motivations, and human goals. So when you're thinking about this, you're combating a human. And you have to remember that. Every time that you find something happening on a system that you're investigating or an alert that you receive that indicates something may be going on, if you're dealing with this type of adversary, you've got somebody on the other end that has gone through years of training and they've got a whole organization behind them focused on breaching into your environment. And the reason why they've been so successful over the years is because the DAC is seriously mismatched at this point. Most organizations are not in the business of running a cybersecurity center. They're there to sell a product or manufacture a product, and security is secondary to that mission of their business. Yet for these APT groups, that is their one and only mission. So let's do a side-by-side comparison of what is generally, we'll call the kiddie scripter. So the kid on a Saturday night, nothing better to do, and an advanced persistent threat actor if we walk them through a potential campaign that they may launch. So the kiddie scripter is going to download the remote access Trojan off the internet and probably use it pretty much as is. Whereas the advanced persistent threat actor may either create their own tool or take the tool that they download from the internet, and they're going to modify it a little bit. And when they modify it, they're actually going to run tests in a lab to see if all the traditional AV and firewall systems out there are going to alert to its presence. So when they target, they already know that the likelihood of detection is going to be low on the tool that they use. Now, if you're lucky enough to get an alert or discover this remote access Trojan, a lot of people will send it up to a site called VirusTotal. Let me submit the file up there, and VirusTotal will tell you which of the AV programs out there will find it. And if you give them the binary, then they will actually distribute it to all the AV vendors that are out there, who then generate a new signature, update their product, and then you've just told the APT group you just found them. So one of the things we generally tell during a forensic investigation is the worst thing to do is to take some unknown binary and send it out to all the AV vendors until you've fully determined the scope of the attack in your environment. You don't want to tip your hand to the attacker too early before you've figured out everywhere they are in your environment. The kiddie scripter is just going to blast the email out and see who might click on the link in the email or execute the attachment. Where, as we were just talking about, the advanced persistent threat group is going to be very targeted. They're going to go after possibly even specific individuals within the organization, the executive administration staff, the C-level staff, a research team. Now, the way they find that out is they're going to do some social engineering investigation about the organization before they even construct this attack. The kiddie scripter is going to get lucky if somebody clicks on it. And that is one of the most prevalent vulnerabilities that are out there in the world. You can't patch all the human vulnerabilities that you're going to deal with. The system vulnerabilities you'll hear about all the time, this bug in this code caused this vulnerability, but it's really the human vulnerability that's the biggest problem facing organizations today. So through that social engineering, through sites like LinkedIn, Facebook, you'd be amazed at how much information you can find out about what a corporation and what the people in that corporation are doing by spending a little time in these social networking sites. They will craft a very specific email. And it will be very hard to tell that that email did not originate from within the organization or from somebody that you just met at a trade show, perhaps. And then they attach something that says, hey, look at this data sheet you were interested in when you went and visited us at RSA or something like that. And the individual, just without thinking, clicks on it, launches the remote access Trojan or other piece of malware, and their system's owned at that point. So when the remote access Trojan detonates and launches and starts connecting out to the command and control server, the kiddie scripter is like, wow, it worked. Cool. What do I do now? They have no mission to accomplish at that point. However, when it happens with an advanced threat group, their mission just started. Now they're going to start working the next phase of their mission, which is compromise credentials in the environment, get authenticated ability to get into the environment, spread out to other systems and set up additional backdoors, and it'll use different methodologies and tools to accomplish that. So if you discover one way they got in, they've got 3 or 4 more that you don't yet know about. The next steps for the kiddie scripter, not planned. They're more than likely going to make noise in that environment. Things that hopefully the Security Operations Center is going to pick up and detect that something's not quite right. Where the advanced attackers are going to be planned in what they want to do when they get in. They're going to be looking to cover their trail as they go and not make any noise in the environment. They want to get in, run silent, and be undetected for as long as possible. So failure to the kiddie scripter, well, that didn't work on them. Let me try these people over here. See if that works. For the advanced persistent threat, that didn't work. Let me try a different campaign, but my focus on who my target is does not change. I couldn't get in through this path. I'm going to try another way, see if I can get in through another means. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of these security breaches. So we're going to stay a little focused on some of the top breaches as we go through this part. So Target, one of the most prevalent ones, biggest in the news of the last 2 years. So let's start with the impact to personnel in an organization. So you're working for a company or you're a security professional in that company. How's it going to impact the company you work for? So after the dust of the Target breach settled, 7 of their board members came under fire because at a board level, they weren't focusing enough on cybersecurity and protecting their clients' personal information. Their CEO lost their job. A lot more people lost their job too as a result of this. But CEO stepped down as a result of that. But on the plus side, Target never had a CISO before this incident. And they hired one as a result of this. So it does actually create opportunity as well, especially for cybersecurity professionals. Now the security operations team, the concerning part about this is the alerts were generated that could have alerted Target that the fact that this was going to happen. As the tools were being downloaded, they did get alerts. Their monitoring team in Bangalore solved the alerts and sent the information to the central team in Minneapolis, who did nothing with it. Okay? So one team probably getting some praise for doing what they should have done. Maybe they should have followed up more. I don't know the underlying details of that. But then another team is suffering the consequences of letting that attack get through and the subsequent fallout from that attack. Let's switch over to the impact from a cost perspective. Now, for the Target breach, the number's actually gone higher than since this article was posted. I think the number's somewhere north of $165 million loss to the company and counting. And they spent $61 million in new spending on security. Part of that being the cost of the investigation itself, new methodologies, training for the people, new technologies, drop in profits of 46%. There aren't many companies that can survive a hit like that and still be in business today. The financial institutions, all these credit card companies, having to change out cards, cover the fraudulent charges, $200 million loss. The attackers, first batch they sold, $54 million profit. Sony, one of the other big ones in the news right now, estimated at $100 million. From an economic standpoint for the whole country, all of these attacks that are occurring, and we'll cover some more details on some other types in a little bit, costing hundreds of billions of dollars a year to the US economy. Now, when we've got a budget measured in the few trillion dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars is a significant decimal point in that, and thousands of jobs being lost. All of these costs are also passed down in just everyday things that we buy. The security industry is north of $60 billion right now. Now, for us that are seeking jobs or have jobs in that profession, that's good news. We got jobs for life at this point. One of the things I've loved about the security profession is what I learned 5 years ago barely applies to what I know today. So this is something where you're not going to get a degree, get a certification, and never stop learning. You're always going to have to up your game. Okay? And because of that, all of these costs, I mean, like we said, Ford, GM, they're in the business of making cars. They have to pay for metal. They have to pay for electronics and rubber. The security is an add-on cost that they wish they could do without. And that cost gets passed down into the price of the car, the price of the radio, the price of the TV that we pay for. So let's look at the impact from a national security perspective. Everybody remember reading about Stuxnet? So everybody knows that Iran's working on their nuclear program, and one good way to slow them down was to take out their centrifuges that were enriching uranium. And they're controlled by computers, so if you are to introduce something that basically starts making those systems not cool things down properly, but to the readout to the operator everything looks fine, things start going bad real quick. In fact, that also happened to a German steel mill where the software specifically targeted the control systems for the blast furnace to the point where it overheated and pretty much became useless. And then the one I like best is if you can tell me how two separate countries can work independently on stealth fighter technology and create a stealth fighter that is identical, the odds of that happening are beyond reason. So up top is the Chinese J-20 Zhengzhou stealth fighter. Bottom is the F-22 Raptor that Lockheed built. They are pretty much identical. So you can see that that gives a country both a military and economic advantage. They didn't have to spend years researching what materials to use, the avionics and electronics that go in it. They just copy and replicate the manufacturing process. Years come off the development cycle. Let's look at the impact from a legal and privacy perspective. How many watched the State of the Union address this year? Cybersecurity was mentioned prominently in that State of the Union. Lots of follow-up articles around that. White House wanted to basically write into law that businesses had to tell consumers within 30 days, if their data had been compromised. There's one small problem with that. Average time to detection of a breach, 243 days. That extra 30 days isn't going to do much at that point. Also, if you're a multinational doing business in other countries, there's a lot of privacy laws out there. For instance, the German Workers' Council, very concerned about monitoring people even in their own workplace. So even when they're working on their computer at work, what they are doing on there is subject to these privacy laws. So even to establish a monitoring program to look for threats comes under the scrutiny. Well, if you can look at everything that's going on that computer, then you can monitor what your employee is doing, and that's a privacy concern. So you run into roadblocks you have to get through at that point. From a reputation standpoint, I think Sony's probably the classic example of what can happen to people's reputations and a business's reputation when all of their emails become fodder for everybody. So I think that was it last week, Amy Pascal stepping down as one of the heads of Sony. Everybody knows this guy. Countries spy on each other, do things that probably shouldn't make it out into public news. But one of the impacts of this was US security companies that are going and selling their products worldwide suddenly found themselves under fire. Because these countries were going, how do we know that these agencies haven't embedded, that you're not working together with them, and that they've embedded code to help them do all of this monitoring? So it made them very skittish to do business. And that's still a ramification being dealt with today. So Buzz score is basically a measure of how much a retailer is out there in the public eye and how well they're perceived. And look what happened when the Target breach occurred. Like just went off a cliff. Okay, let's get off impact. Let's talk about how we attack the problem, because it's not an easy problem to solve, not something that can be solved in a day. So, and because we don't have a week to talk about this, we're going to be pretty much at the 50,000, 80,000 foot view. We're going to talk about it from architecting, collecting, analyzing, detecting, responding, remediating, assessing, and educating. So let's start with the architecture part. One of the biggest things to do first is make sure that you understand the threats that you're going to face. I focus on China a couple of times in this because they give me a good example to use. Every 5 years, China issues an economic report of what they're going to focus on in their economy. If you read that report, it is a blueprint for their attack groups that they are going to direct on what industries they are going to target. High tech is always in there. Clean energy was added, I think, on the last one that they came out with. But here's the thing. If you're a clean energy company, then you know the sight's squarely set on you. But if you're a subcontractor to them, they're going to use you as an avenue. One of the easiest ways they get information, they learn who the law firm is that is working for that company. Because if you're filing patent information and stuff that you're submitting to the patent office, that law firm probably has it on their computers. And they are far more easier to break into than a lot of organizations are. And the data is easier to get at. So if you're running a company or in head of a company or in charge of security, one of the things you need to do is not just look at your own security, but anybody you're doing business with or anybody you're contracting out to, such as a law firm or anything else where they may have access or be given access to any of your data. Make sure you understand legal and regulatory requirements. So there are industries where you have, like HIPAA law. So if you're a medical professional, you have to do your due diligence and protect patient privacy. Know what you're protecting. So one of the things we'll do is say, map out and tell us where all your data is. And then if you run any kind of investigation in their environment, they'll be amazed at where else that data appears. How many other systems, laptops, workstations, that stuff will appear on. And not in the state of protection they thought it was. As you design out your security architecture, you must build in ongoing tests and validations, not just for the technology, but also for the people in the organization. And not just the security professionals, but everybody that has access to any type of technology in that organization. One of the other things you have to figure out is who's going to tackle this. Do you have the staff in-house to do this all yourself? And are they capable? Are you going to contract it out to a professional organization and let them manage it all for you? Now, one thing you got to remember is contracting it out for somebody else to manage does not transfer the risk. If you get breached, you're still the one that has to deal with the ramifications. Yes, you can fire that company for letting it happen, but you're still on the hot seat because it happened. Or you can do a hybrid approach. So some places, I can handle this part on my own, but if I get in trouble, this is where I'm going to pull in expertise to help me out and figure the problem. And a lot of that right now usually falls in the area of reverse engineering of malware, because reverse engineers are very hard to come by, especially good ones, and they are highly paid. Few organizations can afford to have them on staff. And in fact, we've seen, about a 60% increase in demand for reverse engineer malware analysts out in the industry in the past year alone. A lot of vendors out there will claim they do it all. They've usually done it through acquisition of technologies. Generally, they will probably do one or two things extremely well. That's what got them their brand recognition. That's what got them noticed in the market. And the other things are going to be, well, I just want to be able to get that checklist so that they'll think of buying everything from me and I can offer them a discount package. So remember when you're evaluating vendors that all-in-one doesn't mean you're getting the best of breed in everything in the environment. You really got to look at every area independently and see what value they're bringing. And it still might make sense to buy it all from one vendor because you're going to save a lot of money doing that, and then maybe spend some of that savings in key areas where they were weak to augment up the capability. No matter what a marketer says, there is no silver bullet plug-and-play solution. Training never stops. The adversary is learning new ways all the time. They're testing against systems. If you are not staying in reasonable lockstep with them, you're going to lose the game. It's okay if they score a field goal once in a while. We'll do football analogies now. But you've got to be the one scoring the touchdowns and ultimately winning. And winning doesn't mean you're keeping them out all the time. It means you're keeping them from successfully getting your data off the system and being able to utilize it. Also, especially if you're just starting out, it's going to seem daunting to try and do all of this. There's a lot to do, a lot to cover, a lot to educate on. Don't try to do it all in one shot if you don't have the resources to do it. But do plan your phases out. Not doing anything is far worse than starting to do stuff. So like, take out the big things first, start getting some value, and usually what that does is it starts hopefully freeing up your time to start taking on those other projects. But if you're not doing anything and all those alerts are coming in, or you're dealing with breach after breach, then you're never going to have time to get the program deployed. Now from a collection standpoint, so you got to get data in, you got to be looking at something in order to figure out, do I have something bad occurring or not? So if you're not looking at the right data, then obviously you're going to miss it. That's kind of what apparently happened at Target. The Bangalore team looked at the right data, saw it, escalated. The team in Minneapolis was not looking at the right data, missed it, went by, and they didn't get alerted to it, didn't react to the alert properly. There's all types of data you can collect. So there's log data, event data. For that, you got to watch your audit log settings. So you take a typical Windows 7 system, right out of Best Buy or whatever, and look at what it logs. It doesn't log very much. You might get 30, 40 events a day logged in the event log. You go into that system and turn on all the DoD recommended settings, what they call stigging the box, Security Technical Implementation Guides. And that same box will start generating about 10 events every second. Every process start, every object access, every file open, everything gets logged at that point. You got to figure out where the medium is. What data do you need in order to get what you want to look at? Network traffic is very expensive and voluminous to capture and record, especially in larger organizations. So you usually are not storing that as long as you'd like to, and as long as you're storing your log event data. But the one thing you should be definitely doing is building in some kind of workflow that if there's an event of interest that is triggered, then some automated action should occur that tells your network collection solution to carve out anything from that IP or that traffic session that's occurring and store that for a much longer time period until you've had a chance to investigate it. User profiles and roles are one of the biggest areas that allow the attackers to gain higher levels of privilege in the environment. Most places I know, they hand a computer to a new employee and their user ID has administrative access on that local box. And of course then, if the attacker gains access to that system as that user, they can rapidly elevate their privilege and move out to other systems far more easier than if they were a normal non-administrative user. Asset information really helps with the prioritization of alerts that are coming in. So if you have something targeting the executive administrator's laptop versus a back-end print server, which one are you going to look at first? If you don't know any relevance to the targeted asset, you just got IP addresses about it or something, you can't make that decision. Or you have to take more time to figure out what the decision is it's going to make. You've also got to have access to intelligence. If you're a financial organization, there's a group called FSISAC. All the financial services come together as a security consortium and share information amongst each other. Well, if you're a financial and you're not part of that, you're missing out on some great info, because if Bank of America got attacked and you're Chase Bank, it would be great to know some of the details about how that attack worked. before they target you. So it helps you get you ahead of the game. And there's a difference between what we call tactical intelligence and strategic intelligence. So tactical intelligence is more what I call highly volatile data. So IP addresses, MD5 hashes of malicious files, domain names, they have short lifespans. Once an attacker has burned an IP or their malicious program is discovered, they're going to change things up and not use that IP or make modifications to their program so it doesn't have the same MD5 hash. Strategic threat intelligence, however, is a little bit more long-lived. Now I'm talking about threat groups that are out there. Has anybody heard or read about the APT1 report that Mandiant put out about 2 years ago? Marcel has? So this is your homework for tonight. Go to their site, download the report, read through it. It's basically a dossier about one group out of China and how they've been for over 10 years successfully targeting American corporations and getting data out of them, and how all the pieces were put together. And why it's different is because now I'm talking about individuals, and habits of individuals don't change overnight. How I write a program, how I learned my programming style, where I'm primarily working from, the hours that we usually work. When I get into a system, do I go left or go right more than often? You know, think about burglars. Burglar breaking into your house, you know, both of them may kick in the front door the same way, but one burglar may specialize in electronics. So he's grabbing your TV, your computer, things like that. Whereas another burglar may fence jewelry. So once they successfully get in, they take divergent paths in your house. Same thing with threat actors. They specialize in certain things and act certain ways as they're getting into the environment. Make sure you have a good retention policy that addresses every type of information that you're collecting. Okay, because if you're not storing it for as long as you're going to need it, I guarantee you you'll have something occur the day after that data was deleted, and then you'll wish you had it. When your preservation of evidence, the one thing you got to focus on is, are you focused on prosecuting the individual or protecting your organization? If you're going to prosecute, you're going to have a lot of legality issues in preservation of evidence. You're going to have to prove that that data is sound, was not modified, did not leave control of the individuals that will be testifying to the legality of that information. Now that usually involves insider threat. So if an employee is stealing your data, something like that, or a competitor in the same country is stealing data and you're going to sue them, that's where evidentiary rules are going to apply. But if a foreign country or terrorist organization is coming after you, you're probably not trying to take them to jail. Your first focus is going to be, I got to protect the data. And then your rules are more focused on, I have to be able to get at this data as fast as possible and access the information I need quickly. I'm not so much worried about, is the data sound and integrity, non-repudiation, and all those things. I'm a firm believer in log everything, because the one thing I didn't log will be the one thing I need when I'm doing a forensic investigation. But that does not equate to correlate and analyze everything. So the difference between log management and SIM solutions, a log manager collects log data and makes it searchable. Probably has some reporting functions around it as well. Whereas the SIM solutions, the security information event managers, actually, as that log data is arriving, are analyzing it and comparing it to other log sources and looking at correlation rules and putting it all together and trying to tell you, well, based on these 4 things, I believe this kind of attack is occurring, or this kind of policy violation is occurring. You don't need to send everything into those SIMs because that takes some processing power. And the SIM vendors charge you on how much processing power you need to do their solution. So if you're sending everything in, but you're only looking at these 6 log sources, you're throwing your money down the drain. And also, you log everything because to my knowledge, nobody has yet invented a Wayback Machine. So after the attacks occurred, you can't go back in time and reconfigure everything and get the data and then start the investigation. It's too late. It's done at that point. All right, so analyze the data. Signature detection lately gets a really bad rap because it doesn't find advanced stuff. However, I will say that if you have a good signature that triggers in your environment, the one thing it does give you is a very specific action you need to take. I know this is happening. Not, I think something that looks kind of like this is happening. One has a very direct action. Anomaly-based alerts require a little bit more thinking about what I'm looking at, maybe checking a few other things, and validating that it was an actual real alert in my environment. So anomaly-based, you got to kind of watch your signal-to-noise ratio and make sure you're not inundating your alert team with a bunch of false positives and wasting their time. Also, you got to look at how valid the action a system is taking. A lot of times when a remote access Trojan is detonated on an endpoint, it will inject code into another process. Explorer, service host, one of those. So if I see my Explorer program communicating out to a system outside my network on port 443, well, one, the attacker uses port 443 because every firewall lets it go out, because everybody doing HTTPS browsing is going to go out port 443. But if Explorer's the one doing it, that's not right. I would expect iExplore, Chrome, Firefox, one of my web browsers to go out that, not my desktop management program. You gotta look for escalation of privilege and users doing things outside their role. If the executive administrator's laptop is remote desktoping to other systems in the organization, that ain't right. You can set up procedures and policies and look for violations of that. So one of the things we will commonly recommend is establishment of a jump system. So if you have a Windows Active Directory environment and your administrators, one common thing administrators will do before this policy is they'll remote into a system, do administration, and then just immediately remote to the next system. And they pretty much are just jumping one system to the next, which can look a lot like what an attacker would do as well. But if you have a jump system, the policy basically says, I have one system in my organization that's locked down, and it requires two-factor authentication. So two-factor, something I know, something I have. So I know my password, and I have a token that's maybe generating a one-time password, and I need them both to get in, okay? And the policy says that every administrative remote access must originate from that jump system. The minute an attacker breaches a system, gains administrative level access, and jumps, it should fire an alarm in your environment. It's a very easy high-fidelity rule to alert on if you implement the policy properly. Active hunting, no matter how good your security program is, no matter how good your teams are, assume the attacker got in and they're somewhere in your environment. Go find them. Challenge your team to do that. Have your team practice trying to get into the environment because they know it best. And if they succeed, plug the hole and repeat the whole cycle. Try to discern and know the good, the bad, the unknown. Good Windows files, signed, good MD5 hashes, I don't need to worry about those. Known bad files, I have a specific action I should be taking when any one of those appear coming across my network or landing on a system. The unknown ones, I don't know if they're good or bad, I need to be looking at. I need to be investigating, figuring out what they are, why they're there, who put them there, and then making a determination if they're good or bad, and filing them into one of those two categories. For visibility, you have to be able to do code analysis. As binaries are being downloaded into your environment, Word documents with code in them, malicious PDFs, you have to have something that's breaking them apart, inspecting that code, and figuring out, is something malicious going to occur if this were to detonate in my environment? So you have to have that visibility into the code. Network traffic, collect it. Some of it you'll use for automated analysis. Some of it you'll use as part of a forensic investigation. So Poison Ivy does a minor level encryption of its command and control traffic. So the attacker uses the command channel to get in. He'll upload and download files through that command channel. He can watch your video screen. He can start and stop processes, change your registry key settings, all kind of things they can do on there. But all of those commands are initiated and done through that channel. Now, if I capture the initial download of that binary, or I can capture the memory on the endpoint of that binary, I can actually go in with some free utilities that are out there and actually get the password that Poison Ivy uses, and then throw it into another program. So the two are Chop Shop and Volatility are the two that I use to do this. I can actually look at the network session that's encrypted, apply that password, and decrypt the entire session and see everything that the attacker was doing. Now, where that comes into play is if the attacker was offloading data, I can now unequivocally state to my upper management, this is the exact data they got. And if I have any due diligence to report to a user community or my consumers, well, if only 10 million of my consumers got their credit card information compromised, I only have to notify them, not the other 40 million that the data did not leave. You only have to notify who got impacted. Investigating high fidelity alerts. Anybody been in a security operations center, seen all the alerts? So I always see the one where all the alerts are coming in and they got the top priority ones, what I call high fidelity. So a rule I wrote in ArcSight basically said, I have a workstation in my protected network. Sometime during the night when it's not normal working hours, that workstation communicated to a foreign country. The amount of data sent was fairly small in comparison to like visiting Google, YouTube, and everything else that occurs during the normal business day. When it occurred, nobody was logged in to that workstation. How many want to know what was going on that workstation when that communication occurred? Every security practitioner should be raising their hand right now, right? So that's what I call a high fidelity alert. If that rule triggers, I know I'm going to be investigating that system. There's no question in my mind. So why would I wait to start grabbing the network data, start grabbing the endpoint forensics data? I should have automated actions occurring that are doing it for me and dropping it in my lap as a high priority alert. Here's all that data you needed. And yet we'll see a lot of organizations where, oh man, I got to go get all that data to look at that one. Let me look at this other one first. I can do that one quickly and knock it out of my queue. And yet it's not the one that's going to impact the environment or impact the organization. From a detection standpoint, you're always going to have humans somewhere in this. You're fighting a human adversary. You're going to need humans at some point to look at the really interesting stuff. Passive detection techniques I basically classify as things that the intruder is not going to definitely know are there. So if I am passively tapping into the network with IDS, malware analysis systems and all, the attacker doesn't know they're there inspecting all of that traffic. So evading them makes it a little bit more of a challenge for them. However, active detection usually generates noise or has configuration settings that the attacker can actually inspect. So if the system is set up to log events a specific way and the attacker gets in, they just go in and start changing the configuration, deleting the log files. They can take actions against active detection methods and use it to hide themselves. Evasion techniques are basically where, okay, I can't get by this without being seen. How do I make it look like I'm not bad? So I try to evade the detection capability. And when we get into that, we can talk a little bit about virtualized sandboxing for malware analysis. So there's static malware analysis. You take the binary, you look for strings, you look at how the file was packed, you look at the header. You can find some things out about a binary without actually running it. Dynamic analysis, you actually run it in an environment and monitor what it's doing. And there's two prevalent kinds that are out there. Virtualized sandboxing basically hooks through the hypervisor in a virtual environment, and as the program running executes system calls and gets interrupted in the system to open a file, allocate memory, read the system clock, the hypervisor is noting what these actions were. If this program detonates, it'll initiate this network connection. It'll drop this file. It'll open this file. It'll make this registry modification. However, as the CPU is executing, as the program has control of the CPU, the hypervisor has no visibility into that. And that's where evasions can occur. In systems that do full system emulation, basically the emulator becomes the hardware that the code is executing on. So the CPU is emulated. So now I see every single instruction that's being executed on the CPU. And if the code is basically spinning its wheels, trying to get the analysis program to time out and pass it along, I can evade through that. If the analysis program patches any sleep that I have in there. So let's say they do a sleep call and say sleep for 5 minutes before I execute anything. Well, a lot of these systems can patch the sleep and jump the clock ahead. But there are ways to spawn off another process and monitor if that patch gets, or if that sleep call gets patched. And if it does, the malware does nothing. So sleep patching is one way. The code can look at the system and see if it looks like a sandbox. It'll check for like user identities and when they've last logged in. It'll check the last time a system got booted. It'll look for typical programs. So like is Chrome installed? Is Adobe, Acrobat installed? And if it doesn't see typical programs most users have, it'll detonate quietly and not do anything bad. Some of those delaying loops we talked about and those race conditions, waiting for one process to kill another process, and if it doesn't happen, the malware knows it's being patched. Another thing you can do with the full system emulation is, as the code does conditional branches, so let's say it's looking for the presence of something on the system. A full system emulator can go in and actually change the result of the comparison. Oh, if this equals 0, go left. If it doesn't go right, I want you to go both ways. Let me run you one way left and one way right and see if you do something different, something malicious. Now, in the past year, we've seen over a 2,000% increase in malware using these evasion techniques to get by sandboxing technology. Now you know why reverse engineers and malware analysts are in such high demand. So for those that have been in a security operations center, you walk in, the whole wall, probably about $150,000 in big high display panels. What's prominently on panel number 1? CNN. Super Bowl. Robin Mead in the morning. One of the other panels, bunch of bar charts, graphs, displays, all fully populated. Why? Because when the boss that paid for it all walks in to inspect the SOC, they want it to look like it's doing something. Now, all the SOC analysts in the room are ignoring everything that's up on that screen. It's not telling them anything. So I've always wanted a SOC screen. Big green dot, everything's okay. Something bad happens, big red dot. Hard to miss that, right? Or let's put it in real world terms. Back to my movie War Games. So the NORAD Command Center, peacetime. The world looks all quiet, right? Everybody's relaxed, nothing's going on. until a launch detection happens. Every single person in that command center has a job to do when that alert happens. When an alert happens in your main displays that your SOC team is looking at, somebody should be reacting to it. There should be a workflow associated with every alert that occurs. If not, why are you cluttering your view up? That's how you miss the important thing. Response. Prioritize. There's all kinds of different malware that's out there. Commodity-based threats are more nuisance-oriented. Adware in that classification. Yeah, it's a pain. Yeah, it slows me down. I got to like unclick it or whatever, but it's not going to put you out of business or get somebody fired. Destructive threats. CryptoLocker just goes out, gets an encryption key, starts walking and encrypting every file it encounters. You want to get them unencrypted? Pay me $300 or whatever they're charging for that one. We already talked about what Stuxnet did. Then there are what we call the human-driven threats. Remote access Trojans. Now the reason they're classified differently is because the remote access Trojan's job is to let the real threat in, which is the human. And what they do when they come in your environment, you don't know what action they're going to take first. It's not necessarily easy to predict. Like when I detonate code, this is what the code's going to do. So there you're battling a human adversary. Something like CryptoLocker, a lot of the domains that CryptoLocker used to go get its encryption key were taken down. So I got one sample of it and detonated it in a sandbox, and all I saw was hundreds of domain resolution requests occurring. Try this one. Nope, not resolved. Try the next one. And it was going through its entire list of generated domains. And then I killed the program. Now, where that's relevant is that if I'm a security operations or endpoint analyst and I see that that's all that's happened, I know that nothing's been destroyed on the endpoint. It didn't get its encryption key yet. So I can go in and safely remove that program and clean the system. However, if it had gotten its key, then there was a website that, like, I think it was Fox Security and FireEye worked on, where they could actually, if you sent them the program that was doing it, they could extract and be able to help you decrypt your files for you. So two different paths based on where it was in the attack lifecycle. And then automated workflow, use as much as possible. We've used several examples already of why it would be a good thing. In the end, it saves time and reduces the amount of personnel that are needed to do the same level of work. And if you're a SOC manager, a CISO, or somebody that's authorizing the budget spend for that, that's music to your ears. When you remediate, usually they'll take one of two paths. They'll just blow the system away and re-image it and put it back in production, or they may do a more surgical strike. Now, timing's everything when it comes to this. If you're dealing with a human intruder that's gotten in and they've already branched to a dozen more systems and set up backdoors, cleaning that one system actually hurts you more than helps you. Because if you don't do a good forensic investigation on that system, you're not going to know that they're moved out to these other 12 systems. So you whack that system, then 2 days later, you start seeing another system generating alerts. Whack that, then another one pops up. So you start playing the whack-a-mole game. Instead of doing a complete forensic investigation and figuring out everywhere the attacker is and knocking them out in one shot so they can't get back in. Some people like to watch and learn. Okay, they're in, they haven't got my data yet, let's see what I can learn about them. Maybe I can learn more about what they're doing, so if they try to get back in, I can better detect them in the future. I've seen some brave souls that will actually manipulate the data the attacker's trying to get. So they've gathered up this data in a 4 gig encrypted file, and they're slowly leaking it out to their command and control server. They'll go in and just start doing random bit flips in the packet. So by the time the attacker gets it all at the end of the week and tries to decrypt it, it can't be decrypted. So they wasted that whole time while they start preparing their defenses and getting ready to kick the attacker out. Whichever way you all just take, and you don't have to be one way for every attack, just remember your ultimate goal is to stop damage, prevent loss, prevent destruction or disruption of your business operations. As you're doing your assessments, you must get to the root cause. And my throat is too dry to do my best Yoda voice at this point, but or forever play whack-a-mole, you will. A true APT group is not going to give up, so be ready. One of the most telltale signs that you actually did kick them completely out is the spearfishing campaign starts back up. If you go and clean some systems and you are fairly sure you're dealing with an advanced group and you don't start seeing some spearfishing, they're still there somewhere. Keep looking. Don't just focus on technical reasons. Humans are usually the ones that did the click, fell for the spearfish. Educate them, teach them what they did, help them learn how to recognize the signs of a spearfish. Recommendations cover all areas. There is no one silver bullet. You're not going to buy one solution that fixes everything. So make sure you're addressing all of those areas as you go. The people at the front lines need constant education, constant recertification. Sorry if you guys thought that you were going to get your certification or degree today and you were done. You're just starting, but it's a fun ride. Constant drilling, all the way up to your board, down to your legal, HR, IT departments. They need accurate information. You must involve them in your incident response process. They must know what data is at risk, what's been exposed, what's been publicly made known, so that they can make proper executive level decisions on how the company or organization is going to respond or handle the situation. It's really great if you can tell them if data actually left or not, because if they don't know, they have to assume worst case situation. For the staff, we talked about these spearfishing drills, utilization of jump systems, so you have some policy detection to do there. The biggest violator is usually too many people with admin rights to their boxes. That's one of the immediate controls that can help. And also social media training. My wife teaches 6th grade, so middle school. And I, once a year, go to her school and to my kids' school, and I do internet safety for children. So I teach them about how to protect themselves against online predators. Things like, oh, did you know when you take that selfie with your phone and your geolocation services are turned on, and then you post it, the exact location of where you were standing is embedded in that photo. So an online predator, even if you're standing in your bedroom, can basically figure out where you live. I go through what they're putting out on Facebook, and then I watch every teacher in the room get up and head to their computer and start making profile changes. So remember, human vulnerabilities always exist. That's the one most difficult thing to patch and continue. You're always turning over new employees. You got to have an education program and process. And as you're building out this program, we said earlier, you're never going to completely cut off all avenues of access into your environment. An advanced, persistent threat is going to get in someday. It's going to happen. That doesn't mean you lost the game, but you have to be ready for it and handle it. So your object is, as you deploy these technologies, is to basically limit their paths and avenues of access as much as possible. That allows you to focus on where your hunting ground needs to be, where your most advanced team members need to be really doing active hunting in the environment. And as you mature your security operations model from things like basic log collection to more advanced hunting techniques and incident response processes, the better your organization is going to be equipped to handle a breach when it does happen. So in summary, we talked about the evolution of security roles. You all are starting in an exciting field. It's going to be a fun ride for you, but get ready and hang on. Advanced adversaries do not give up. They know what they're after. They are on a mission, and they are going to keep coming at you until they get ultimately what they want. Thank you all.